Have you ever been hard on yourself? Have you judged yourself harshly? Maybe judged yourself in a way that you wouldn't judge another person? What I'm talking about, it can look like a couple of different things. It can look different in different situations. It might look like reliving an experience and thinking about how you could have done things differently. One that I've experienced before is, like giving a talk or a presentation and having these thoughts of like, oh my gosh, that must have gone horribly. People must have been thinking I'm a blabbering idiot. They must have been judging what I'm wearing, the way I used my hands during the talk. Oh my goodness, it was a massive failure. When in reality, that wasn't the case. There was no evidence to show that it was a failure. That was me judging myself. I don't do that one really anymore. A little bit every once in a while, but not like I used to. Being hard on yourself can also just look like having really high stress when you feel like you've got a million and one things to do and you're just being hard on yourself for having not completed them, when in reality you're not a super human who can do all of those things at one time. And maybe the things that you're judging yourself about not having done aren't really on an actual timeline. Maybe it's a self-imposed timeline that you've created for yourself. Being hard on yourself can look like worrying about something you said or did just in a social situation, thinking that maybe you said something stupid or silly or something that wasn't great, when in reality nobody gave you any feedback that what you said was harmful to them or hurtful or anything like that. Being hard on yourself can look like just focusing on your shortcomings and saying things like, oh my gosh, I'll never be successful, I'll never get to where I want to be, I'm so far away from my goals. And that's as opposed to celebrating the progress or success that you've made. And one other, I think, way of being hard on yourself is when we apologize in our language. Oh, I'm so sorry for this. I'm sorry about that. Sorry, but that kind of language. It's not a direct being hard on yourself, but it's a way of showing that you actually don't really respect yourself in a way or believe in the words that you're saying. And I think that it is sort of a veiled lack of kindness towards ourselves. So that's what I'm talking about today, is how to be kind to yourself rather than be hard on yourself. I'm Dr. Kit Slies. I'm a life coach and licensed psychologist, and I'm here because I want to inspire perfectionists and anxious achievers to feel calm and confident while holding clear boundaries. So if you resonated with any of those examples, if you feel like you can be hard on yourself, one question is, why the heck do we do that? It's like, if we're generally like a nice person, why are we hard on ourselves and mean to ourselves if we're nice to everybody else? There's lots of reasons why this might be the case. It probably goes back to something in our childhood or upbringing. It could be there was somebody in our family who was harsh or severe in judging themselves, and we witnessed that and sort of learned by example. Or they could have been also harsh or severe on judging us and having really high expectations for us. Maybe their intention was good. They wanted us to be successful and achieve a lot in this world, but they inadvertently created this mindset that we're never good enough and we've always got to be reaching for that next thing and can never be in that calm, cozy, safe space of feeling like, oh yeah, I'm doing great. This is great. I still might have some goals to reach, but I'm on a good track here. So that gets created from our environment. It might not be in our family also. It could be just societal cultural expectations. Even like our school systems create this sort of mindset that like, oh my gosh, I'm not worthy if I'm not getting an A, right? And it can create that sort of tendency to be hard on ourselves. And what a lot of the reason that becomes a habit, because it is a habit that you can change, right? A lot of the reason that becomes a habit is because we feel like that habit is serving us in some way. And maybe it does, to a degree. Usually what folks tell me is the reason for that, the being harsh on themselves, it comes from a place of motivation. I've got to be hard on myself and light that butt under my fire, or else I'm not going to get there. And the reality is that's not true. It's a habit. And so it's hard to imagine a different way of motivating yourself. But the thing about this habit of being hard on yourself is that it's actually pretty ineffective because it leads to feelings like shame. It can lead to a depressed mood. And it gets us caught up in this ruminative worry, this thinking where we're like almost obsessing over the situation when we could be putting the energy towards something more productive or fun, you know? And so all of those things, the shame, depression, or anxiety, rumination, that actually results in a loss of productivity. Okay, so how do we get out of the habit is the question, right? There's three steps. The first step is to name and acknowledge. Step 2 is to find some self-compassion. And then step 3 is to shift your thinking. Okay, so the first step in name and acknowledge, there's a couple different things that we're going to name and acknowledge. First one is just naming and acknowledging, oh, I'm being hard on myself right now. You might want to name that this is maybe your inner critic. This is a part of you that tends to come out in these situations. You could even give your inner critic a name. The effect of saying, oh, this is my inner critic, or this is, you know, Susie, Sally, Peggy, whatever her name is, right? The effect of that is something called cognitive diffusion. It separates us from our thought. So rather than thinking that, oh my gosh, I have to think this way, or that I do just naturally think this way, it's like, no, this is a thought that I can look at and examine and manipulate, and it separates you from that thought, that way of thinking, rather than being sort of like a victim to the thought and getting caught up in it. It's like, oh, hey, my inner critic is here and that's happening. Now there's a distance between that criticism. The other thing that you want to name and acknowledge is any feelings or just struggle that is associated with that being in that place of self-criticism. Do you feel sad, anxious, or just acknowledge like, this sucks. This feels hard. This isn't fun. And the effect of naming those feelings or that struggle is that by naming them, we can intensify the feeling and kind of help it process a little bit more quickly. Those feelings it can be are temporary anyways, and by naming and acknowledging them, we allow them to move through us rather than letting them sit and fester in an unacknowledged closet where they're like banging on the door and come out eventually anyways. It's like, hey, okay, the feeling is here, the struggle is here. Let's just sit with it for a second. We're not going to live in that place, but we're going to acknowledge it so that we can move through it. Because the next step after moving through that is to find some self-compassion, which is the opposite of being hard on yourself. And what we're talking about in self-compassion is how can you be kind and comforting with yourself? And it might just be a go-to phrase that you just have, okay, that was hard. I was being critical on myself. I'm just going to try to be kind to myself. So a go-to phrase or a go-to sort of paradigm or concept that you create for yourself. You might want to ask yourself, how would I treat a friend who was being hard on themselves? What would I say to them? You might want to call to mind a person in your life who is very kind and gentle with you. This might be a parent or a friend, a loved one, your therapist, somebody who, when you think of them, you're like, oh, it just feels so good to be around them. And when they just really accept me as I am with all my quirks and, imperfections. And when I'm done being around them, or when I'm around them, I actually feel energized and motivated, right? How does it feel to be around that person? What do they do that creates that for you? Become them for a moment. Take on their voice if you need to. Let them speak to you. So, or be a parent to yourself. How would you, as a kind, gentle, guiding parent to your inner child or your own child, how would you speak to that person? pick one of these paradigms. You've either got your go-to phrase or just a paradigm of a person who is gentle and kind and who energizes you as a result of that gentle kindness, or the way that you would want to be a parent towards yourself or your child, and use that language with yourself when you're being hard on yourself. Use that language towards your inner critic too, because we don't want to become critical of our inner critic. Now we're just perpetuating the habit. We want to be kind and compassionate to ourselves, to our inner critic. Oh, okay, Susie, inner critic. Hey, I see you, and I see where you're coming from. Maybe you think you're helping me. And yeah, you know what? There's times when you've motivated me, but maybe you could take a rest and take a load off for a little bit. So the third steps, we've done the first two steps. We've naming and acknowledging a couple different things, our inner critic, the feelings and the thoughts, the feelings and the struggles. The second step is taking a stance of self-compassion and trying to figure out what that feels like. That might take some trial and error. It might feel awkward. That's okay. You practice that one. There's no expectation of perfection here on your first try. And then the third step is to shift your thinking. So this can take many, many different forms. The big overarching idea is that when we are being self-critical, oftentimes we're engaging in thinking that isn't true or that is unhelpful. We might be making generalizations about ourselves, like, oh my gosh, I'm always a failure, right? And it's like, is that actually true? Are you always a failure? Have you failed at every single thing that you ever tried in your life? No, because you're here. You are successful at something. So let's just reshift that thinking. Oh, I'm not actually always a failure. I might feel like one right now, but I actually do certain things well in my life. I have done things. Hey, this cup of coffee that I just made tasted pretty darn good. Okay, could be a simple thing like that. If you are reliving that situation, the speaking example that I gave at the beginning, and you're like, oh my gosh, I did everything wrong and people must hate me. It's like, well, did anybody tell you that you gave a horrible talk? Okay, maybe somebody did give you some feedback as to how to improve. Number one, that doesn't mean that the talk was a failure. And number two, great, take the feedback if you think it's useful. That's doesn't mean you can be hard on yourself about it. But looking for, in the thought patterns, are your thoughts true? Is there evidence for the thought that you're having? If you're judging yourself harshly, is there evidence or reason to do that? If you're focusing on things that you feel like you did wrong, your shortcomings, shift your focus to things that you have accomplished or that are doing well. Try on for size some what if success questions. So when we're being self-critical, we're focusing on all the negatives. Let your brain be in the positive space for a little bit. What if I end up doing this thing really great? What if everything turns out just as planned? What if I don't finish everything on my to-do list and I feel fine anyways? What if questions, try them on for size, see how they feel. Speaking of the to-do list, if that is your one that you're being hard on yourself for, maybe you need to just recategorize it. Instead of thinking that everything on there is on fire and has to get done yesterday, create a category of to-do list. Items must be nice to complete, will be nice to complete, and items need to do, they're sort of must be done in the sense that they are survival items. You will see that very few of them end up in that live or die category. Most of them are, yeah, it'll feel great when I complete them. Take some of the pressure off. If you're apologizing about lots of things, just notice that and invite yourself to be kind to yourself by just believing in what you're saying. Ask yourself if you can do that. So we have those 3 steps. You're going to name and acknowledge the criticism, the feelings around that. You're going to find a path to self-compassion, and you're just going to reshift your thinking a little bit here. That's how you get out of that habit of being hard on yourself. And I hope that you found this helpful and can invite yourself to be kind and compassionate and gentle with yourself so that you can feel calm and confident and set clear boundaries for yourself in this world. That's it for now, and I'll see you next time. Bye.